professionally, I've been in the accounting and finance world for the last 22 years, I guess, at this point. I've gone from sort of very large auditing companies to very billion-dollar companies to my focus in the last 12 or so years has been basically head of finance and operations and HR for smaller venture-backed startup companies. So my specialty has been sort of from an entrepreneur saying, hey, I have an idea. What do I do now? And all the way to Series B, which is roughly, a multi-million-dollar enterprise with about 50 or so employees. And about almost 3 years ago, I'm coming up on my 3-year anniversary. I had this epiphany one day of just sort of, what am I contributing to the world? And, I've built the career that I wanted, right? To be a head of finance of a, very large company, but is this what I wanted to do? And is this what I want to do going forward for the rest of my life? And there in that sort of introspection really came out of this sort of coaching. First was from a personal standpoint, then it moved to business, and that led to the creation of Solve Your Books, which is an accounting and bookkeeping company that really helps entrepreneurs, get their financial data in a very clean manner so that you can actually blend financial intelligent decisions with your gut reactions. So today, we're going to be talking about personal finance budgeting, which is such an amazing hot topic, as always, in good times and in bad. So we're gonna, like I talked about sort of in the Instagram posts and things like that, we're gonna learn how to prioritize your income, how to spend money to align with your values, and develop financial rituals that really keep you on track, right? And again, I know there's some specific questions. I have them with me, and so I might answer them throughout, and if I haven't, I'll definitely answer them at the end. This is going to be a really meaty conversation. So let's just get started. Okay, so why is budgeting the hottest topic when it comes to personal finance, right? It's because the general public believes that if we have a budget, somehow it'll solve all of our financial problems, right? If I'm in debt, I must go get a budget. If I'm in this, like one of the, in January when 2020 started, one of the New Year's resolutions is always, I'm going to be on a budget, right? And then by this time, sometime in April, usually probably sooner than that, that budget goes on the wayside. And so what I've been really honing on is how to help clients develop a budget that works for them, and then make financial habits that actually stick, right? And so, what I always say is budget is really important, not because it'll solve all your problems, but because it can actually build a very strong financial foundation, that won't really be swayed by the latest trend in terms of like, this is the hottest clothing, we must go get this, or hottest makeup, or whatever, exercise regime, whatever it is, right? Or crushed by the latest financial surprise, right? And so when we have budgets in place and structures and how we want to spend our money, it really sort of protects us from really any surprises that comes our way. And, so how, a budgeting exercise is usually, I say it takes time, right? And the thing that I always think about is, this SEAL saying, which is like, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? Creating a budget takes a little bit of time. And once you've got it locked down, then it becomes very smooth and very fast, right? But because it actually does take a little bit of time to think through, right? And just to give you like a full example of a corporate world, like when I was doing budgeting for a $2 billion enterprise, that exercise typically took us probably a 2-month end-to-end process, right? And you know, even with startups, even probably took even, you have to be nimble, but it does take time to kind of think through, right, all of the different aspects of an actual budget. And so, you know, what it really, really requires, right, is, you know, as we're going through our budget, it takes a lot of courage to actually look at your numbers. And it takes a lot of fortitude to actually do something about it, right? Because we oftentimes, what happens is we set this, you know, pie in the sky budget, and then it's like, yeah, no, we're not doing any of that. And then it all goes away, right? Because what we really need is an examination of our life, of how we spend the resources that we have. And I teach a lot about money and the flow of it, but also energy as well. You know, it's something that I teach sort of like more on the slide. You know, people come to me because I have technical financial skills, but what I really marry that is a financial mindset. And to really think about, you know, what are our resources at large, financially, energetically, and time, right? And so really a budgeting exercise is an exercise in what you value. To me, that is, you know, a budgeting exercise in a very, you know, what is out in the market right now is sort of like, these are the things you must do, right? You must categorize all of these things, but it's really missing the whole point of why we're spending in the first place, right? And so really the question I always ask is, what do you value? What do you value in your life, right? For your family, for yourselves, for your children. And I love this Joe Biden quote that says, don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value, right? Because a lot of times when I first start working with clients, I will always say, you show me your numbers, the last 3 months, and I can pick up a financial pattern, and I will tell you why you are in the situation you are in currently. And so I think that's such a great quote from Joe Biden, just like, we're making all of these decisions or not, they're just happening sort of without really thinking about it, right? And so really, what do we value? That's really the first thing in anything we do when we're talking about money and time and resource, really, right? I went through this period of sort of, what did I value when it came to my contribution to the world, to my children? You know, it was really looking at Stella, my daughter. She was 2017, like a year and a half, you know, when I just looked at that little face, chubby as I can be, like, is what is mama telling you right now, right? Mama's telling you that I work 60, 70 hours. I'm completely stressed out. And yes, I make really good money. But is that what I really want to leave for my children? Is that what I really valued, right? Is that what I was really going to contribute to their world? That, hey, girl, this is how you make it in the world, right? And so what I think is really interesting in this COVID space is that now is the time, right? Like, you might have been pushing it off on doing a budget, or you might have done one and it's like, it just didn't stick for one reason or the other. But what I found with all of this COVID stuff is, number one, we're home a lot more, right? So our busybody is being asked to slow down, right? And so now is the time to really look at what is your current financial health? Where are you at, right? What your dreams and goals are, right? I really think that this is a time to kind of go deep in and say, all right, you know what? That is no longer available to me. What is my next step? What do I want to do? right? And how to reduce debt and really start saving, how to actually think about those things that I want more of, so I can put money toward that and value that and really get rid of the debt, because that's all really just dead weight towards our, our true, our sort of true value that we really want to go forward, right? And so in this time, right, we're really given an opportunity to examine what is valuable to us and our families. That's something that I continue to think about as, everyone's asking me questions, right? And I see what we're talking about is this is the opportunity, right? If you are no longer have an 8-to-5 job, right? This is your opportunity. Whether it was time, it's always pretty much time. People always say, I am way too busy to actually do a budget. And so the COVID-19, what a blessing it is to basically say, this is the time to examine what is valuable to you. And for me, like, as I am kind of, following people and what is it that they're really connecting to, it's a human connection. That's all, like, what we really want and need is human connection, right? We're here on this Zoom, right? Whether it's in person with your family, or maybe you have a quarantine friend, or quarantine, right? Or they're, virtual. We're doing virtual connections, right? How many people have done, right? Like Zoom happy hours and Zoom, mom nights and dad's nights. And like my husband was on a dad night for literally an hour, a bunch of dads Zooming and drinking scotch. Like, right? This is what we really care about, each other, right? And that human connection. And of course, nature, outdoors, right? I can't tell you how many posts have been in LA about, whoa, what a beautiful place LA is, and we're biking. And we haven't done that in how many of our years, right? Cooking meals at home, right? As I work with a lot of families and couples. And, one of the things that is always such a resource sucker, I'll say that way, is going out to eat, right? Is that they don't perceive that they have enough time to cook meals at home. And so it's, ordering or picking up or going out. And really, I've never seen so many people post banana bread, whatever it is, or something has rice. I don't cook, so please don't excuse me, but like, my sourdough bread has risen, or whatever it is that people are saying these days, right? But, banana bread, and everyone is showing what they're cooking at home. And it's, it's a value that we somehow in the modern time have lost, right? Our ability to cook for ourselves and our ability to take care of ourselves. And this is what I really love most, is being creative. A lot of entrepreneurs I'm working with had to pivot. And those who can pivot very, very fast are the ones that are going to survive this COVID-19, right? And really just sort of slowing everything down and being able to care for ourselves, and I'm saying this as a mom of two. So it's been, of course, difficult, but finding those rituals, whether it's a morning meditation or a nighttime yoga, whatever it is, right? And I always say, like, you have to start valuing your time, and you have to start valuing your money, right? Those hard-earned dollars that we slave away for every day from 8 to 5. If you have a regular a job or even entrepreneurship, then it's 24/7 pretty much, right? And so I think it's also really interesting that it really felt like, at least, 4 weeks ago, when this whole, gosh, it's been 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I don't even know what week we're in right now. But since mid-March, we'll say that, it's literally, I keep thinking like the universe has decided to put everyone on a financial diet, right? That's what it really feels like, right? So like, if we look at our credit card statement from, you know, maybe pre-March and then post-March, right? It's literally like, oh, you used to go to all of these restaurants. Nope, not there anymore, right? And even if you wanted to order from some of these restaurants as a support, that's more of a value than it is you're actually needing it, right? And so really, I felt like, you know, even for me personally, right, all the things that I used to do, and not to say that they're not important, but it really gives you an idea when you take a break, right? It's sort of like we went to some sort of fasting. When we give our body a break, when we give our finances a break, then we start understanding what we value and what we might want to introduce. And that's why I think the budgeting talk today is extremely, extremely important, because, you know, as Ashley just shared with me, Texas is starting to reopen perhaps tomorrow. And so the biggest thing is, if we hadn't learned from this, we're going to go back to our habits and then start spending again, right? That stimulus check that we might or might not have gotten is going to go real fast, right? We all know. So, and really, you know, now's the time to, you know, develop that muscle, right? And the first thing we do when we, in budgeting is value. And number two is priority. What is priority, right? And so let's talk about that. So how do I build a budget? So most of the times, if you're hearing about budget, you know, is very much, okay, you have an income, right? And then you spend on rent, you spend on food, you spend on gas, you spend on insurance, blah, 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 right? Again, that whole paradigm is completely based on paying someone else first. And what I care about is you. What I value is you. So the idea of paying yourself first is incredibly important during this time. In any budget that you're building, it's always the first thing that I build into me. If you work with me, you'll know this. It says income. The second line is pay yourself first. And in that bucket, what does that mean? Right? That means that, and maybe let's talk about like why that's important, right? Because, you know, from, you guys will get the link to this if you guys didn't join me, is having emergency funds, right? That is extremely important. The people who had emergency funds when this whole thing hit did not have to freak out about their finances, right? Because they had a certain amount of money saved so that they can continue to pay for whatever it is they need at this point in time. And so, you know, really building your future, right? And really not robbing your future to pay for your past, right? And so really building an emergency fund, building your, you know, paying for yourself for your future, whether that is, you know, 401k if your company offers it, or if you're self-employed, you might have SEP IRAs, or if you want to put that in Roth IRA and things of the sort, right? And saving for your dreams and goals, right? A lot of you guys might want to step away from a W-2 job, but you don't know how to do that because you don't have a source of income in that transition period, right? And so we need to tuck away that money to actually be able to make that transition a lot less painful, right? And really then it's, you know, getting rid of that debt that is continue to be very heavy on your financials, right? And so when I do my budgets, it's literally income, pay yourself first, right? I always say, especially if you're a mother, you are the priority. You are the most important thing, right? And because when shit hits the fan, right? what's really happened in this financial situation, right? If you really think about it, right, is that yes, there was government help, but if you didn't have, that was a 4-week process, and that's a pretty fast turnaround for a government as big as ours, right? So what were you supposed to do during that 4 weeks, right? And so, and as a mother, like, I can only imagine if your ability to earn had gone away and you didn't have that some sort of savings for your children, right? But if you think about it, this is an extreme version of paying yourself first, because nothing else mattered at this point, right? Your rent didn't matter. If you had rent and you didn't have income, I taught you a lot about how to negotiate for those rent-free, right? If you can't pay, you can't pay, right? So one of the questions was, should I pay my bills with the money you have left? And the answer is no. The money that you have left, if you're about to be furloughed, if you're about to, there's some uncertainty into the future, you better save that money for yourself and pay yourself first. That is always the number one thing. If you have a stimulus check, pay yourself first. Tuck it away into your emergency fund, okay? The reason being is you can negotiate everything else, but cash is not negotiable, right? So rent was negotiable, really, right? Any school tuition was negotiable. And if you want to pay, that's really with your values, right? Even your credit card bills, they're negotiable right now. Everything is negotiable. Your utilities, everything that you presume that you had to pay first, all up on the table right now, right? And so that really then should shift your mind into, here's the money I am earning. If it's $100, $600, if you're getting unemployment, right? Whatever it is, save that for yourself, because you're gonna have to eat. And that's really, at the end of the day right now, funny enough, internet is really, really important. And I hate to say that, but second to that, right, is food, right? And even with food, and you'll see how I prioritize these things, right? And so we're going to talk about sort of a normal budgeting, and then we're going to talk about like COVID-19 type of thing, right? So pay yourself first. Everyone got that? Any questions on this one? No? Okay. And it's for me, it's always shifting that paradigm. Save first before you spend. Okay, and everything, if you're not putting money away for yourself, everything else is spending. Okay, and so so you have income, right? And then you have pay yourself first. And then what is left over is what I call mindful spending, right? It's not that you can mindlessly, just spend a bunch of money, because that's usually what happens in our culture, is that there's just sort of things that are, there's so much calling and, at our money. And so we really have to be mindful, right? And so what we look at, the next step is sort of fixed cost, right? And so those are things like your rent. Those are things like your utilities, your car payments, your health insurance, if you're paying out of pocket, your car insurance, things like that. Things that are fixed that sort of are every month. Okay. And your internet bill, your Zoom account, if you have one. Things that are, for those of us with children, obviously tuition is something that's recurring every single month. If you are in preschool or private schools. All right, so then that goes from income, right, minus paying yourself first, and then goes to fixed cost, right? The other bucket of that mindful spending is what I call guilt-free spending, right? So now you've paid yourself, you've taken care of things that are fixed, then you really get into the guilt-free spending. And so we'll just use a simple example, just so it's not obviously reflective of real life. But let's say your income was $100, and paying yourself first is, $25 of that, or even $50, depending on how much debt you have, right? So what you have left for mindful, let's just make it even. Paying yourself first is $50. So now you have $50 left, right? And let's say all your fixed costs is $25. What is left for guilt-free spending is the remaining $25, right? And so I always tell my clients, and pipe up, this is true, you've heard me say this before, I don't care if you blow that $25 in Vegas in 1 week, 1 day. I care that you then start knowing that that $25 is yours to spend however you want to, whether that's going out with friends, but you have to eat, right? And you have to be able to, take care of yourself, right? Whether that's, going to the nail salon, going to get your hair done, whatever it is, right? Your gym memberships, your blah, blah, blah. And so really the reason I put food into this category normally is because we overspend dramatically when we overspend on food. Always. When I work with clients that are either paycheck to paycheck or living in debt, a lot of their spending is because they're going out to eat. And a lot of that is because we're stressed, because we're mothers and we're working a ton and having to take care of our children, or because it feels like I've earned it in one shape or form, right? I worked really hard today, I'm going to go out to eat, right? And especially I work with a lot of clients in high income areas, San Francisco, LA, New York, Boston. Takeout is very expensive, right? And if you multiply that by 4, right? Every meal we go is $100, $200, right? And groceries for a week is that same amount, right? And so really, I put that as a remaining amount, because it then forces us to look at, whoa, I have been overspending. Yes. And I always say, like, I'm not telling you to, some parents have been like, well, then you're just telling me I need to go to Costco. I'm like, yes, but also Costco also sells, organic stuff. And no, I'm not telling you to stop going to Whole Foods. If organic is in your family value, then you must honor it, right? But you should not do it as a detriment to what is also important in your life, right? And so it's really safeguarding yourself in terms of how we spend, okay? And so with that, right, is really, really thinking about, so the way I think about budgets is very, very easy. There's sort of only really 4 attributes, right? What happens with normal budgets, it's like, okay, so I'm going to spend $100 on lunch, $200 on dinner a month, $500 for, $200 for coffee. Okay. Like, whoa, like you're going way deep into, and oftentimes that's where we abandon, because it's like, crap, I spent $50 more on breakfast than I should have, right? And then you're like, fuck it, just not going to do it anymore, right? And so it becomes a point of shame, to be honest, right? A point of like, I'm just not good enough to actually keep a budget. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at this whole budgeting thing, yeah? And so, we dive, or the other thing I have, a lot of times is, oh my God, there's just so much data, I don't even know where to begin, right? And so you have apps like Mint or other apps that are helpful these days. But even then with apps, it's like, well, what was my password again? Like, how did that work? And gosh, I haven't looked at this in a really long time, and I really don't want to look at it, yeah? And so, and what I say is, like, focus on the big picture, right? I don't really care with that $250 if you spend it all on coffee, right? Like you need to be an adult and take care of yourself, right? So if you want to spend that amount of money on just going out with your friends, right? It's having a little bit of control, right? And so what happens with people that are constantly living in debt is because they feel like they need some control of some sort, right? And so they're like, wow, or they deserve. There's a sense of entitlement combined with sort of like, I need control, right? And so the perpetual people that are in debt are perpetually in debt unless they work with someone that really gets them out of it and help them see the bigger picture, right? So for me, it's what you're bringing in, what future are you building, right? What is fixed and what is flexible or guilt-free spending. And even then within those two buckets, what I oftentimes this will happen is, especially in a high income area like San Francisco or LA or New York, rent is so expensive, right? So then all of a sudden we're like, holy crap. So if I want to make that dream come true, and after rent, I literally have $300 left for food. And you're going, let me recalibrate, right? Let me recalibrate. Or a lot of times people will start looking at that car payment and going, did I really need to buy an XYZ? Or can I actually get rid of that? It's not important for me anymore. So I make a little bit of change, right? So what was fixed was, maybe a $700 car payment. Maybe I can make that a $300 car payment, or maybe I could just get rid of the car payment altogether. And then, okay, so I only had $300 to spend. Now I have $1,000 to spend on food. Is that aligning with your value, right? And one of the things is really interesting is that literally in LA, we are not getting into our cars, right? And so I see all these beautiful cars parked on the street doing literally nothing, right? And not to say that when the economy does open up, as LA is really starting to talk about, that we won't use it, but it does give you a little bit of like, like what is the alternative here, right? So when you're looking at those things that are a little bit more malleable, shall we say, changeable, is one, how can I negotiate for a better rate? Because now you're saying that because I have to pay this XYZ, I won't be able to spend the money I want on my food, right? When people start thinking that way, then you see the large changes of time, right? Or you're going to negotiate and you're going to start really, changing that dial. Maybe it's a little less over here, a little bit more over here, and so that it gets to that perfect sort of budget. Not that there's such a thing, but it gets to a budget that you need right now. And so with COVID-19, like literally, if you are thinking about perhaps being furloughed, or if you don't have that much to spend at this point, all of that should be paying yourself first. Then you're going to go and negotiate everything, right? And guess what? You have the time to, and you better start getting creative about a second source of income, right? And so, any questions there before I sort of move on to a few quick habits? So kind of, I think there is a question on the side, but yeah.
Yeah, there is. I have a few on my end. Do you want to just answer them at the end, or you want me to go into detail now?
So I just want to show you guys this really, really quick as an example. I don't know if you can actually see it, but this kind of goes through like, paying yourself first, and then what's for mindful spending. Yeah, so I'm probably going to create a worksheet shortly that I will have it on my website that people can download and actually use. Okay. Yeah, so any advice to speak to spouse about budgeting topic. My husband manages all of our finances and doesn't have the head space for time to budget. Okay. So this then comes into why, right? And so when I work with couples, the first thing I work with is making them understand that a partnership is a partnership not only in love, but in finance, right? And so if they're resistant to it, what we need to do is figure out, one, what is it that you guys, what is a common goal that you both can join, right? So paying yourself first. For you guys, that might be making sure that you have enough for the children's school, that you have your own retirement, that you have blah, 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 right? That you want to retire by a certain age, whatever those goals are. Common goals, I think, is really, really important when you're working with a partner, right? And so sharing that. And so some of the things you might be able to say, it's not finance related, because men can be very ego driven when it comes to finances. It's like, I've had so many husbands that are like, oh no, we're not working with you, right? Or they're just resistant. I literally had a husband get on a Zoom call, shut it off, turn it back on, shut it off, turn it back on, and then basically at this end, we're done, right? This is how it brings a lot of ego out when we talk about money. So I want you to think about your relationship and how you have approached your a difficult conversation with your husband. So I always say something like this, understanding why you need to budget first and foremost, and then approaching him with that message. I feel like I really don't understand what's going on, and it would make me feel a ton better if we can sit down and make time to discuss it. Is that agreeable with you? Right? Right, like if you don't have time to do the actual budget, how can I support you in that? I see that you're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. How can I support our family? Is it that would you like me to do the budget? Would that be helpful? And then discuss it with you, right? I think a lot of times it could be very contentious, but really thinking about why we want a budget. What is it, just that we want control? Okay, let's talk about that, right? Or is it that we really sincerely, and this is pretty true for the most of the time, and if you've coached with me as a couple, is that you need to know what's going on, right? You as a woman need to know what's going on. You need to know where your life insurance stuff is. You know where all of your logins are, all of the stuff, right? So I just worked with a client. She's secretly working with me in some way, shape, or form. And she realized that she didn't have a login to their joint assets that was well north of $1 million. She didn't have a login to it. She knew they existed some way, shape, or form, right? And so really thinking about, again, what is it that why do you need a budget in the first place, right? What is it that you want to feel, and what do you want? What's your intention coming out of it? And oftentimes I see men will start, backing, like sort of like they might come out really strong, and then they start going like, oh, okay, I see that this is what my wife needs, and I see that it'll make her feel better if I do this, right? And I can go into lots of examples of how that changed, but more importantly, I work with a military couple. And so, military men are very, very masculine, very ego driven in some way, shape, or form, right? And literally we were going through, and you can tell he's always like, right? Very ego driven, and just like, I don't want to do this. And at one point we realized he saw the numbers and realized that they were living in debt. And he started to blame her for overspending on food because it was her problem. And so I had to dial it back and say, well, this is a family. You are a partnership. Is she having your children or is she having our children, right? Is this a family or is it that she's also just eating hundreds of dollars on her own, right? These conversations about partnerships, about, you know, why we want to get together, about finances. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, so I'm gonna, usually this is when we open up on question. I did want to cover just a few more about habits, and then we'll open up for questions, and I'll just whip through super fast. So the second part of budgeting is really honestly establishing habits. And so if you work with me before, one of those things is always making everything automatic, right? So if you have that 401k, it's that automatic transfer from your paycheck to your 401k, right? And so for a lot of us who don't have that, we need to make that automatic, which means if you're trying to save $200 for your emergency savings fund, right, you're going to make that transfer. When you get the paycheck, you're going to make that transfer automatically to your savings fund, right? You know, and that goes into same thing. If you're trying to pay off debt, right, you would automatically, when that paycheck comes in, it would automatically go out to pay your credit card bills, okay? Because really, you know, habits drive everything that we do. All of our financial, what we call decisions, aren't actually decisions. They're just habits, things that are ingrained in our past that oftentimes we don't actually look at, and how we actually will want to drive those in the future. There's a stat out there that basically says that a very large amount of our spending is compulsive. It's last minute. And 50% of that is literally because it's on sale, right? And so what a great opportunity that we're not really going to the store. And if we are, this is what it looks like. Okay, I'm done, right? This is exactly what we're doing. We're no longer lingering, right? We're no longer sort of like taking our time and being like, oh, I'm gonna buy that, I'm gonna buy that, I'm gonna buy that, all the things that you don't need, right? And so really it's about making things automatic, and it's really reducing our impulse, right? And getting out of our own way. There's some really fascinating, you know, spats about habits that maybe I'll just cover in another time, right? And number two is what I always say, celebrate every success, right? Most of the time when people work with me, they're like, you're basically going to tell me that I can't do X, Y, Z. And so I'm not going to do it. And I always say, you have to celebrate every success. So maybe put it in your budget that if you and your husband get to talk about budget, that you go on a date night or whatever it is that he might want to do, or you might want to do, right? Or that if you know, if you're used to spending $1,000 on restaurants, it's very easy here in LA, and you actually stick to a budget of like, let's say $250, right? To maybe just portion a little bit more, right? And just creating that reward, because that's how habits form, right? And so I always say, like, I want a positive association with our finances and not a negative one. Yeah. A lot of people who live in debt are always like, oh, money, budget, right? No, we need to start rewiring that and saying, money is coming to me. Money is good for me. I'm going to make use of this tool, this fuel, right? And if I celebrate, what happens, right? It's just like how we teach children. What habits are we ingraining in their imprint, right? And so, you know, interesting enough, like, I don't actually give my kids money for chores, right? They do them because they participate in the family. But what I do give them money for is creativity. They must create something from scratch, draw, Lego, Magna-Tile, whatever it is, and then they must present it. So not only are they going to be creative, they're going to be salesy. Yeah. And so what we're doing is we're wiring their brain and saying, this is how creativity rewards me, right? And really then thinking about celebration, whether it's like, then this is where the partnership is super important. We're going to do it together, right? And even with yourself, say it to yourself, we're going to do this together, right? And even if you're in your partnership and are handling your own finances, what is that reward, right? So when I first started my company, I literally said it was really hard for me to actually teach a class, right? And so I said, okay, every time I do it, I get to X, and that X for me was exercise clothes. I have a fascination with beautiful exercise clothes. It makes me feel good, right? So can we celebrate that success? And then can that success be something that we use to remind ourselves that, hey, you got that because you did a great job on this thing. Now do more, right? And rewiring our brain when it comes to new habits, yeah? And so, and also the other thing is that we have to review our budgets every so often. I used to say every 6 months, but of course, it's reviewing upon any change, right? So if you're about to be furloughed, your budget is going to be very different, right? And so I would create one as if right now, and then I would create one if you had less income, right? And really thinking about always our situation changes all the time, right? Right? What did they say? The only constant is change, right? It's all the time changing. And that's also another reason why people are like, I'm not going to stick to this budget. It already changed. That was last month, right? All these excuses we give ourselves, right? And so really thinking about, all right, this is the budget, even if it's a 3-month budget going through the COVID process, right? What happens is if your income is lower, you need to make sure your expenses are lower, which means if we can actually stay at this line of expenses, then it's going to be a very easy transition to when the world opens. And then you have to ask yourself, do I value that? I can certainly tell you I will be valuing my massage, right? Very, very strongly when this thing reopens, right? I'm starting to recognize what I value, what I need as a human being, right? And thinking through like, what do I actually value? What do I actually want to introduce back into my budget? But what happens is if we can actually have a few months of this new budget under our belt, and so, when we teach kids, it takes 21 days to form a new habit, right? Whether that's a sleeping habit that we're trying to teach them. Same thing with us. It takes a certain amount of time to get used to. And with finances, it's usually about a month or two, right? So, you see sort of change, and then you're like, okay, now I'm going to stick to it. That's why I always say, like, stick to it for a few months, right? And you will see, where it goes off rail a little bit and how we can readjust ourselves and then continue to stick to it. And then you will see that when the world reopens and you have that like need to constantly start buying, that is something that you need to work with. It will highlight for you your particular relationship with finances, right? And if you really are, I would talk about schedule everything to come out one day at a time, right? This budgeting and looking at your numbers is not something where you have to spend hundreds of hours on, which is another reason people are like, I don't have time for this, right? Have a date with yourself, right? Have a date with yourself with a glass of wine or a bottle, no judgment, and really look at that and say, okay, this is how I've been spending my money. Is that aligned with my values? And if it isn't, how will I be better next time, right? And just focus on maybe just one thing. Maybe it was food that you felt completely out of control. What is that about? Maybe it's, for a lot of mothers, it's all these kids' classes. We somehow work ourselves into that they must have 5 things to do every single freaking day. And the children are like, right? And so this is such an opportunity for us as mothers to reduce all of that and to ask our children, what is it that you value? What is it that you want? This is on the table if you like it. And asking ourselves those same questions, right? When the world reopens, they're going to say, all of this stuff is available. Who's coming, right? And then you're going to go running or you're not. And that in itself will be such an eye opener for you on how you're going to spend your money. Because if you go running towards all the things, right, and then you go back into spending the way you were before, I think that would be then that then the universe didn't teach you anything during this time, right? So really take this as an opportunity. All right, questions. Okay, should you have a little extra, would you purchase life insurance or invest in retirement? We have no children. Definitely retirement, always, because it will reduce your tax, number one. And because then if you have any extra, always put it in retirement because it's automatic, right? So one of the first things that I work with individuals is always maxing out their 401k, any sort of retirement that they have access to. Because what happens is if we have to write ourselves that check, it's like, right? That's actually a muscle that we have to really get used to, right? Paying ourselves first. But if it's automatic, it's just much, much easier. Should you purchase life insurance? That's a really unique question based on your unique circumstances. The question is, why do you need life insurance, right? So for those of us who have children, of course, we have to make sure that they're taken care of in case of income, right? In case one of us, something happens to one of us and we don't have an income and we have to, support them. If you have, if you don't have any children, I would really ask, why, right? And then let's see, either of you don't have retirement, it might be a good idea to buy life insurance in case something happens, right? Because if you really think about what you're going to use that money for, I think it's much more important. Ashley, you want to find?
Yeah, I have a few. This is going back to the pay yourself first. So for professional and personal development opportunities with the associated costs, would that be considered pay yourself first since it pays dividends, or is it considered guilt-free spending?
So this is a professional development. Is that
for professional and personal development opportunities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would really consider that in paying yourself first. Investing in yourself is really, really important. But what that does is, what happens a lot of times with these is you do it with a hope of some future dividend, yeah? But you do it on a credit card debt. That's not actually paying yourself first, okay? Paying yourself first is saying, I would like to take that class. That class is $2,000. I better save $500, whatever it is, for that class so that I can pay in cash, right? Because what happens is if you actually buy it on debt and this doesn't return, all of a sudden you're feeling pretty bad, aren't you? You're feeling like, geez, I'm paying 20% interest on this course that didn't really go anywhere. Yeah. And so really, I think about is investing yourself is always super, super important. But what is your intention? Right? Is your intention actual ROI of some sort? Or is your intention simply to learn or grow a new skill? And if that's the case, then have no, don't put so much pressure on it. Yeah, a lot of times what happens is we expect the where it becomes not investing in yourself is that you're putting so much expectation on that thing, and then it becomes a guilt thing. Shit, I just spend, I just put that on my credit card, and then crap, like, didn't do anything for me, right? And so then now I'm feeling extra bad about it. I think, you'll hear a lot, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship, is like, take this class, do this thing, la da 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 da, right? I was really thinking about, why do I want to do this? What would happen if actually nothing came out of it? Or did you not learn the lesson if you felt that way? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know you discussed about reevaluating your budget every 6 months. Would that also be every 6 months to reevaluate your budget for setting your money goals as it relates to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so typically when I work with clients, the money goals are sometimes long-term and sometimes short-term, right? And so that's why, when you're trying to save a house, you certainly can't do that in 6 months. If you could, you probably would have bought one by now, right? And so there's some long-term goals and there's some short-term goals. And that's why I really think about, like, maybe you're really heavy in emergency savings right now in the first 6 months of your savings plan. But you know what? You actually funded that whole thing, right? So then maybe you're gonna resource that money toward another goal, right? And so there's sort of a staggering position, which is why I think, revalue every 6 months is really important.
Okay.
Or 3 months.
So then going into mindset, do you find that when you have your credit cards on automatic payments, that you end up spending more because there is less of incentive to look at your credit card statements? Do you have any tips of how to build that habit of automatic payments, but still being aware of what's going on?
Yeah. So make your life simple, right? So whether that guilt-free spending happens on one credit card, that when you're having a date with yourself, you're looking at that one credit card and you're saying, you know what, my budget on this credit card is $1,000 a month. And so I just need to look at one thing. I don't need to look at all the other stuff. It's to make your life simple. Yeah. And so even if it's automatic payment, it's $1,000 and you're within your budget.
Another one is, how do you go about negotiating lower credit card bills per month? Paying rent later, car payments?
Okay.
When you're having a hard time being a good negotiator.
Yeah. So start small. Yeah. So start with the thing, like, let's say right now, people are even negotiating utility bills. I'm just saying, hey, I can't pay right now. What is the best thing you can do for me? All landlords are pretty understanding at this point. And so first step in negotiation is just understanding, number one, what do you want? What do you actually want? Not what people is requesting or requiring of you. What do you actually want? Do you want them to, basically defer rent for the next few months? Do you want, right? So start from there, right? You know what, I really don't have an income right now and I can't pay my rent, mortgage, car payment. If we're going under that assumption, then we're going to pick up the phone and we're going to communicate. Hey, as you know, COVID-19 has happened. Okay, I need you to take this outside. Okay, sweetie? I don't know, but can you take it outside? Right? So call up that landlord, call up the car payment company, right? And just be honest, right? For me, you just have to be like, this is what's happening right now. I work at a gym. I work at at a restaurant. And guess what? My income is gone, right? And so please tell me, like, I can't pay right now. So what can you do for me? Really, a lot of times it's about having that courage to just pick up the phone, right? And to really, I've had clients, I think it was the very first call, I was working with a client of mine and I had her call the credit card companies. And so one of them agreed to waive the minimum. One of them agreed to reduce her rate on the spot, but required a minimum, right? And one of the question was, should you not pay if your credit card company is requiring a minimum, pay it, okay? Because we don't want to destroy our credit during this time, okay? Not paying goes into a whole different set, but communicating is a whole different thing, right? Same thing with mortgage. Everything is literally negotiable, right? Car companies are like, well, if you can't pay me, I have two options. I can either take the car back or I can just postpone your payment. Or what can you do? What can you pay 100? Can you pay 200? Right. So it becomes a dialogue back and forth. Okay. Does that help? Yeah. So lower interest rate, just lots of discussions.
Okay. So going back to emergency funds, how much do you recommend to budget for? Like how many months?
And so I think it's really interesting, right? I think the COVID-19 was a proof, minimum 3 months always,
Okay.
Maximum usually 6 months. I will get that for you in a little bit. Okay, let me finish my conversation. Because really, and it really depends on your source of income. Yeah, right. And so, if you have, right, if you're a restaurant worker and the restaurants aren't going to reopen, the people who don't think they need the emergency savings are the ones that are needed the most and needed the most in terms of like actually need the money and actually needing a lot, right? Because they don't have the ability to transition their skill sets as well as some other people might, right? So right now, I mean, even you look at it, right? COVID-19 started mid-March and we're talking about reopening right around May 15th or so here in LA. So it's been about a 2-month span. And even when it opens, it's going to be LA has come up, or Gavin Newsom has come up with like a 4-step thing, right? And so it's not going to completely reopen. And so I would say minimum 3 months and higher if you are in a job that is not quarantine proof.
And then I have one last one on my end. Do you recommend a budgeting app or
Sorry?
or a software?
Yeah, I don't usually. Most of my clients that I work with, we use Google Sheets. Again, it's about simplicity, not using something else if it's not going to be helpful to you. And for most of the apps that I see about budgeting, again, skips the most important part, which is paying yourself first. And then it goes into spending. It goes all into like, what did you spend on groceries? What did you spend on restaurants, gas, travel, blah, 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 right? It skips the entire most important thing, which is what are you doing for yourself? And so when I work with my clients, it's always on a Google Sheet or some tool, wherever you save your files, wherever you're touching, right? All of us are probably checking emails a lot, right? And all of us are usually on Gmail. And so I like to make it simple, and I like to make it, on a calendar as a reminder. And so we're not like going to some other app and then transferring information or going some other app, to really look at stuff.
Sure. That's it on my end.
Okay. Anyone else? Should we unmute for any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I think
Yes, Stacy, I had one question for you around. So you spoke a lot about what we value. So, for example, if I really value travel, right, should that be something that I pay myself first, or is that considered more guilt-free spending if there's money left? Okay, I
Again,
see.
it's your value. Yeah. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and the first thing I make them do is put travel in their pay your first bucket. Because oftentimes, as entrepreneurs, we work 24/7. And so I make them put it on their calendar that 2 weeks out of a year, they are off. And
Right.
then what we do is we save that money along the way. And I even have sometimes what I say is put a savings account just for that, right? So I see that I'm putting $200. Let's just make it even $100 each month into a savings account, and then like let's say April comes and you're like, oh my gosh, there's such great deals on airlines right now. I'm gonna go buy that ticket, right? And now you have the money for it, and you don't have to worry about it. And so always fund yourself first, your goals, your dreams, what you want to do, and then leave that money. So then, because if you do it as a guilt-free spending, what happens is you're not valuing yourself, or you're having to decide, oh, do I want to go out with friends or do I want to travel, right? That's often the decision-making process in that guilt-free bucket. And so what we want to do is say, you know what? No, you're paying yourself first. You've bucketed yourself. That
Mhm.
most important thing, which is travel.
Right. Okay. Okay. Great.
And this, again, value what it means to you and what it means to me, completely different. Everybody has a different value system, right? If you have debt, that's different. You don't have debt, that's different, right?
Did
Whether
you just
you
mention?
value, going to a retreat every year,
Mhm.
um, whether you value traveling with your girlfriends, alone, buying a house. Everybody has a different dream. Everyone has a different goal. Maybe you want to become an entrepreneur. It's all up to you. And
Right.
it's really important. Um, the way I teach is making sure that you are really taking care of your future self, right?
Yeah.
So that means I will always make sure you have an emergency savings account. I will always make sure you are maxed out on your 401k,
Okay.
because that then prevents you from getting to a point. So I'm thinking a lot about, wow, I'm 42 today. What this would have been like if I was 70 and still making it and still depending on an income. Yeah. And I didn't have a 401k. So often putting yourself in that position of how grateful we are to be still in the earning time of our lives, and then to basically put that money in the future. And as we know, women are living longer than men, number one, and just longer in general, right? So my grandmother is 93 years old. I got a long way to go, and so at some point though, your earning power will stop. Maybe, maybe not, right? Maybe we can find out of ways to have streams of income, right? That would be the fully independent route. If it does, your income does stop because you are, a teacher, and you can't teach anymore at 80, or you don't want to. Um, you then are able to rely on your retirement.
Yeah. And just just to clarify one more small
Mhm.
thing, food, right? Food is a big part of spending, at least for me. And you would put that as guilt-free spending, right? So even if you value food or you're a restaurateur, you would still put that guilt-free. Okay.
Yeah, mostly because it is such a wide range. So I will tell you this is why. So for example, I'm almost at my pharmacy. Okay. Um, for example, like, I'll just give you my own example, right? I set a budget for food every month. Okay. And when I was knee deep in the VC world and the tech world, like I said, I was working 60, 70 hours. And so guess what? I felt guilty that my husband was at home with the kiddos. And so I said, well, you shouldn't have to be at the home with kiddos doing all the bedtime routine and then also having to cook and da 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 da. So we just started ordering. And before you know it, we had spent double the amount, right, on food, simply because I felt guilty, right? So that's a lot of money for a family of 4 to double the amount over a 3-month period, right? And so really, I put that in guilt-free spending because it is such a realm of people can, like, individuals, some people eat really great at $300 a month, right? Because you have flexibility. Yeah. If you cook at home, it's a fraction of the price at then going out to eat, right? And so really thinking about, even that's your value, unless you want to put a bucket in that pay yourself first, that's like, I'm going to plug away $200 a month for me to have, fancy 4 Michelin star meals, every 5 months. Great. Make that a plan, right? But what happens is food and restaurant, Target is also one of the things that people overspend over time. And that's also something that is going to be good now, not necessarily building a future, right? And there's arguments around, little things, right? Like, well, I'm going to spend more because I want to eat organic. Fair enough, right? But if you want to eat organic now and not have a 401k, I would really start to question that, right? And it's a very fine, delicate balance, right? So when I was trying to get out of my debt, so in my 20s, and when all of this journey sort of started, I'm an immigrant, and I started living the American dream of being, in credit card debt. I had a car that I was paying for, all of these things. And around 28, I was like, this is a rabbit hole. Like, I'm just going to keep spinning my wheels. So I got real serious. My food budget was $5 a day. That's it. And yes, could you say that some of my choices were questionable? Yes, they were also questionable in college. So attest to that. But, right? But you need to do what you need to do to make sure you're financially secure, right? Because the alternative, if I didn't do that and I just brought that all onto my family, guess what? Now they're living with the debt, right? And so really think about the impact of what you're doing into the future, right? Everyone will say, oh, I don't want to sacrifice. Is it a sacrifice, or are you just continue to piling and be detrimental to your future because something that you wanted today, right? And so a lot of times it's much more about, we don't want to make those choices, but sometimes for a short period of time, we make those choices because we want to build a better future for ourselves and our family.
And you mentioned on your website, you're going to post a budget that we can kind of start.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, great.
So all of these videos will be on the website. So please, definitely, follow me on Instagram, share with your friends. We're gonna, I'm upgrading my marketing materials on the website. So all of these previous webinars will be on there, along with some sort of, downloadable materials in the midst of making them pretty. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, no. Awesome. So yeah, so in the future, like I said, please do follow me and share. I am committed to, helping everyone become financially well. So stay tuned. I will be, this is the last of the free webinars, and I'm thinking about how else I can support everyone in the future, whether that may be like a small group coaching or online classes. I'm still thinking that through. And so, you know, if it will be announced, obviously through the email that you guys have been receiving, and I'll probably announce that Instagram as well. It's been my pleasure to really host these things, and I want to continue to support people in a way that works for them, for you.
Thank you.
Welcome. See you guys later. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.